Hi, welcome back to another video. And today I'll be talking about this development that has been really going on with the 2024 Dem autopsy report with Ken Martin. We are now seeing resignation calls for DNC Chairman Ken Martin. And as I mentioned in my previous video, um, Ken Martin, a lot with the Democratic Party voter base has been very upset with Hakeem Jeffries, very upset with Chuck Schumer, and very upset with Ken Martin. And now, not only is the voter base upset with Ken Martin, we are now seeing like party officials, like actual people who matter within the Democratic Party, big people up top, are now calling for Ken Martin's resignations. Now, I will note here that the big people at the top, the people who really matter, people like Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries and Nancy Pelosi, people like that have not at this time called for his resignation. However, we are seeing congressional Democrats start to call for his resignation. And we saw a lot of this about almost 2 years ago now, if you could believe it, with Joe Biden. It really did start with congressional Democrats, and eventually it escalated from there after his poor debate performance with Donald Trump in June of 2024, which eventually led to him dropping out in July of 2024, and so on. The rest is history from that point. Um, but so far, we are seeing resignation calls for Ken Martin for this autopsy report. Uh, and this is through Axios. There are more reporting on it, but Axios is the one I like to go back to. I think they're very good. Um, but let's just get into it. The Democratic National Committee chair, Ken Martin, is facing a surge of anger and even some calls to resign from congressional Democrats following the release of the DNC's 2024 election autopsy on Thursday. Why it matters? We don't need to be getting that. Here we go. He should resign. Representative Seth Moulton, hope I'm pronouncing that right, of Massachusetts told Axios, citing his lack of leadership and saying it's utterly nuts it took us this long to release the autopsy. So again, you're seeing just frustration within the Democratic Party on the amount of time it took to release this autopsy. It's not just voters saying this anymore; it is congressional Democrats. Here we go, another one. In a radio interview Thursday, Representative Mark Pogan of Wisconsin said in response to a caller who argued Martin should be replaced, I agree. Having what we have right now is not doing it. So again, more party officials calling for change. Another one, Representative Mark Vesey, hope I'm pronouncing that. If I'm not, let me know, of Texas told Semaphore that there doesn't seem to be a plan to turn things around and the clock is ticking. I believe it's time for him to move on. And again, basically what he's saying there is he thinks Ken Martin should go. He thinks Ken Martin should resign. And this is a Democrat from Texas. Texas. I don't know if this representative is in like some purple district, but I do know that Texas is a state where Democrats aren't likely to win. They usually perform very poorly down in Texas because Texas is kind of a southern state. Um, and so yeah, seeing this, honestly, it is really surprising to me. Although I think more and more, we'll see more and more of these as the days go on here. But yeah, these are the first official three. Driving the news, the DNC released what it says was the full and redacted 2020 autopsy after months of pressure on Martin, who initially signaled he would not release it. Martin sent a subject post accompanying the report that he is not proud of his product. It does not meet my standards. It won't meet your standards. So yeah, Ken Martin shaming this report after he released it, but most are really frustrated with how long it took to release it. Ken Martin was very hesitant to release it, and then when he did, people looked at it and said, "Oh wow, this sucks," and now they're still criticizing him. Although Ken Martin very much would probably like to move on. However, I don't think that's going to be happening. I think that the momentum of the pressure on Ken Martin is only going to build and build until eventually, maybe he resigns or something really big happens. But until then, we will see what happens. So, but there is more here. Martin wrote in his post that he didn't want to create a distraction. Ironically, in doing so, ended up creating an even bigger distraction. For that, I sincerely apologize. So yeah, we went over that yesterday. Um, Representative Sean Castian of Illinois told Axios he does not regret his decision to back former Wisconsin Democrat Party Chair Ben Wickler for the DNC chairmanship over Martin last year. So there's a lot of people as well within the Democratic Party that are feeling vindicated for supporting Ken Martin's former opponent for the chairmanship, because the two opponents came down to Ken Martin and Ben Wickler, and eventually Ken Martin came out on top. And now people are feeling very validated and, just overall correct for supporting his opponent. Maybe people who supported Ken Martin and were celebrating his victory last year are probably feeling regretful, are probably regretting maybe doing so, or maybe not. Maybe not. We'll probably see some forces within the Democratic Party as well to come out and support Ken Martin and back him, especially if the pressure starts to become overwhelming for Ken Martin. So, yeah. So we also have Representative Christine Menifee of Texas says, "I just think the whole thing is odd, saying we're going to do this thing and we'll release it, and then you don't release it, and then you do release it. It doesn't give much confidence." So, yeah. We also have Representative Richie Torres, who is a strong supporter of the establishment of the Democratic Party. Democrat of New York said he is concerned that the DNC appears to be in a state of almost terminal decline. Absolutely incredible thing to see from him, Richie Torres. So that, yeah, not good for Ken Martin here. And then asked whether Martin should resign. Torres said, "It's not my place, but the status quo at the DNC should be cause for alarm for every Democrat in the country." So yeah, he is really ringing the alarm bells here. Again, not good for Ken Martin, and I think this pressure overall is going to continue to build. And also here, another House Democrat told Axios the internal chatter surrounding the release of the report on Thursday was more of a roar because it was done during a week we were winning. Now we aren't because of him, they said. So again, absolutely incredible. We're seeing more and more House Democrats just really frustrated with Ken Martin, with everything that's going on, because now once again this autopsy report is in the spotlight, and it's not a good spotlight for the Democrats. It's not good news for the Democrats to be having, especially when they're trying to be like this big opposition force against the Trump administration. And even to a point where they have been winning time and time again in these local House races, that Ken Martin has celebrated and says, he's mainly responsible. But now we have this autopsy report that's taken up all the news for the Democrats, and it's not looking good for them. All right, so there's more. This lawmaker and several others predicted more statements to come from their colleagues demanding Martin's resignation. So we have like what, five, three, four, five. I think it's three. Richie Torres said he was concerned. So right now, officially, there's three resignation calls for House Democrats, for Kent Martin's resignation. But more suspect that more are gonna come for his resignation. So yeah, I do, as of right now, I can see Ken Martin resigning. I don't think it's gonna happen within the next week. It could happen within the next month or two. Again, this stuff takes time. It took Joe Biden 3 to 4 weeks to be forced out of a presidential race. Again, now the stakes aren't as high as it was back then, but if the money for the DNC, the money has been very poor just for the DNC. Like the DGA, the Democratic Governors Association, has had better performance with the money, uh, just like donations and all that stuff. And the DNC has not. The RNC is mopping the floor with the DNC when it comes to financial money. I'm not being biased. I'm just stating the facts. That is literally a couple days ago. There was a report. The DNC had 14 million, and the RNC had like 100 million or something crazy like that. It was in a election cycle where the Democrats are very heavily favored. They are heavily favored to win. Especially when you go and like you look at the polling for the generic ballot, the Democrats are up by 7 points. They're up by 7 points. Look at this. So far, they're the highest they've ever been in this election cycle. They're up by 7 points. The Republicans briefly had the lead because they were coming out of the 2024 elections. Democrats took it because they're the opposition party. And now they're up by 7 points. And with all this going on, Ken Martin is facing unbelievable amount of pressure to resign because of this autopsy report. and Democrats are very frustrated with Ken Martin, despite the fact that the Republicans' general ballot have gone from, like, within the last 3 weeks here, 43% to 41%. And not only that, but we also have, where is it here? President Trump's job approval is also in the toilet. Look at this, negative 18. That's almost negative 20 points. Donald Trump is almost at never mind. He's below 40% at this point. But his disapproval could reach 60%, which would be insane. All this going on, the Republicans' generic ballot polling is in the toilet. Trump's approval rating is in the toilet, and but yet Ken Martin has gotten his fellow Democrats so frustrated with what has been going on with his autopsy report that he could possibly resign amid everything that's going right now for the Democrats. It is insane. So we have some more quotes here. Martin still has a fair share of Capitol Hill defenders, including former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, who has told Axios she believes he should stay on as DNC chair. Nancy Pelosi will be a big one. As of right now, she's backing him, which is completely expected. But again, she could flip, as she did for Biden. Previously, she said Biden should stay on, and then when it got too bad, she said Biden should stay off. So there's a lot more I'll get into later, but as of right now, it's not looking good for Ken Martin. This video is getting too long. I don't want it to, so I'm just going to wrap it up with here. As of right now, we are expected for more Democrats to come out and call for Ken Martin's resignation. I believe eventually Ken Martin will probably resign. If he doesn't, I don't think the DNC is going to improve money wise. The autopsy report is bad, but the money problem is so much worse. And I think that if Democrats don't improve, or if the DNC doesn't improve financially, it is going to get so much worse for Ken Martin. And I do not think he can hold on to this job. His colleagues and many people within his party believe that he is incompetent and he can't lead the job, and that he should resign. So, what I do think will happen is Ken Martin will eventually resign. Not anytime soon, but eventually he will. And when that happens, there's going to be a um like this kind of like power vacuum. Like, who's going to be the chairman now? He hasn't even been on the job for 2 years. He's been in for a year and a half. And if he is ousted now, it's going to be it's going to be chaos for the Democrats. Not electorally, because they are probably still going to perform very well. 2026, I will be dropping prediction videos soon. I still have a lot to do within my IRL life, so please stick with me. The videos are coming out. But anyways, yeah, that is pretty much it. I think eventually Ken Martin will probably resign. There will probably be some chaos with the leadership on who will succeed him. But this will probably go on for these next couple weeks or possibly a month. I do think maximum for a Ken Martin resignation, probably 3 months. Probably 3 months. Anything below that, like in between, I think is a possible resignation. But the farthest I think he can hang on is 3 months. If he hangs on the longer, that's just because I think like he's like trying to fix the money problem, and if that doesn't work, he will be forced out. So I think Ken Martin's resignation is inevitable at this point. Eventually, it will happen, not anytime soon, but it will happen. But anyways, that's it I have for you guys today. I hope you guys enjoyed watching. If you did, please like and subscribe, and I will see you all in next video. Bye.